so much energy.
Yes, colonialism is a critical question. Malcolm talked about colonialism. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee talked about colonialism. Black Panther Party talked about colonialism. Frantz Fanon talked about colonialism. Oppressed people all around talked about colonialism. But then there were, many of these people were crushed, organizations destroyed, and therefore that places certain limitations on where they could go with the understanding around colonialism. But we're in a period today, 2021, where we recognize that colonialism is not simply a policy, it is a mode of production. We've been taught that capitalism is a mode of production. We've been taught that feudalism in Europe was a mode of production. What we're saying is that we've come to understand that colonialism itself is a mode of production, and that it is the primary configuration, economic and political configuration of the whole planet Earth today. This configuration has come as a consequence of colonial domination, colonial slavery in the first place, and it's important to characterize it as colonial slavery. Because otherwise what happens in this country is they talk about slavery as a rite of passage, as this is something you go through, but it's colonialism. It's an attack on Africa that is responsible for conditions of African people everywhere on earth, including Africa itself. So we've come to understand that colonialism is a mode of production. It is a mode of production that brought Europe out of the state of savage, feudal existence, poverty, starvation, disease, a lack of freedom. It was colonialism that did that, and it did it at the expense of Africans and other colonized people. So you have a social system now that has come into existence. It's a parasite on the rest of humanity. Colonialism functions as a parasite on Africa, as a parasite on what we now refer to as the Americas. In fact, there couldn't be an America as we know it without a parasite, because the indigenous people did not come up with the term America or anything like this. This is a part of the parasitism that sprang from the feudal existence in Europe and rescued Europe from a state of poverty, disease, ignorance that it had been locked in for more than 1,000 years. You're with me on that? And so now a new mode of production has come into existence. And this is something that this body, this coalition has provided the ability for us to talk about. And then so we talk about police terror, deepening the resistance to police terror. This is not a call for body cameras. This is not a call for giving the police sensitivity training. This is recognition that under colonialism, terror is an absolute necessity to maintain the dominance of a people. You can't steal everything from a people. You can't steal the whole country. You can't steal their culture. You can't steal their language. You can't just lock them up in prison and predetermine that they would have early death without permanent state of intense and serious violence imposed on them all the time. Violence and actuality of a threat of violence all the time. So this is, so we say this theme about deepening the resistance to police terror is part of the theme of undermining the colonial domination of African people. We must resist. We have a right to resist. When I say right, I don't mean legal right, because slavery was legal. They didn't give us the legal right. They didn't give Nat Turner the right to rise up and kill the slave master. If he'd waited for the law to say that, we'd still be enslaved today. And so we're not talking about the legal right. Who makes the law except the colonizer? We say police terror is necessary for the maintenance of this relationship that Africans and other colonized people have with U.S. imperialism or with colonialism. That's why the U.S. is engaged in permanent warfare all the time. That's why they're killing people in Afghanistan. These have this discussion. They're murdering people in Afghanistan, starving people in Afghanistan, doing the same thing or trying to do the same thing in Venezuela, doing the same thing, trying to do the same thing in Syria, all over the world, because the whole social system we live under came about as a consequence of Europe crawling out of European feudalism and attacking the rest of the world and stealing our resources and locking us into structures that maintain their dominance at our expense. You with me on that? So increasingly, what Africans are coming to understand that the reason there's no food in my refrigerator because that food is in the refrigerator of the colonizers. The colonizer has our food. The colonizer has our infrastructure. When I go to Paris or London, New York, or places like this, that's the explanation for why there is no electrical grid in Sierra Leone. That's the explanation of why in our own communities, even in the United States, there's poverty, there's gentrification, dilapidated housing, because all of that stuff is in their community of the colonizers. That's ours. And so this whole consequence of living up to what they require of us, you're trying to get out of a hole by digging a deeper hole for yourself. So police terror is absolutely necessary to maintain the colonial world order. And these political prisoners and prisoners of war are the consequence of the resistance to colonialism. That's why they are there, because they resisted, because we continue to resist it. And the colonial terror was so effective because against the colonized people, the US government makes, and all colonizers around the world, they make war without terms. There are no terms for the warfare. There's no Geneva Convention that say how they should treat Africans. That's why they could do what they did in places like Vietnam and all the napalm. And right now the people in Vietnam are suffering from the consequence of the poison that he intentionally dropped there. That's why they could do those kinds of things to us in these places, because there is war without terms. It didn't matter about legalism. There's so-called wars that they connected. Comrades Vice Chair Lisa Davis, I think, mentioned on yesterday. The whole thing about what they call COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, that they initiated against that. That's a war without terms. Doesn't matter what the Constitution said. That's why they can lock you up and create designer laws for you. They create a law like 3 strikes you out. How the hell can you come up with a law like that when you got a Constitution that says you can't try a person more than once for the same offense? Don't they say that? In the Constitution, you can't try a person more than once for the same offense. But if it's 3 strikes you out, 3 strikes, it means that you have been now tried not for what you just did now, but you're tried for what you did or they said you did the other 2 times. Because law has nothing to do with it. It's colonial domination. And the fact of the matter is, of course, brothers and sisters, as you know, the law is simply the opinion of the ruling class. Right. That's what it is. So if the ruling class is a slave-owning ruling class, then that's who the law serves. That's why they captured Nat Turner and then put him on trial. They put him on trial. Listen to that. They captured Nat Turner and put him on trial. And they found him guilty. What did Nat Turner do? He tried to break out of slavery and the enslavement of our people. He tried to lead a resistance to make that happen. It was illegal because it was the law of the colonizer, of the colonial slave master, not the law of those of us who were being enslaved. That's the kind of social system that came into existence through its contact with us and with the indigenous people and others around the world. So we say, free these political prisoners. Now, it's too late. In fact, the only reason they can hold them today is because the effectiveness of this military assault on our people, and also the fact that there were collaborators within our own communities who accepted that because they didn't want the total freedom that we are talking about now. They could be satisfied with sitting on the toilet next to white people, as Malcolm X would say. Integration or some other kinds of solution that did not take us to total liberation. Free them all. That has to be our demand. And the fact is, the only reason we're making a demand like that is because we have not yet achieved the organizational strength to go get them ourselves, like we got a South.
That's right.
Because they have no legitimacy at all. And then we talk about Black community control of the police as an anti-colonial demand, a demand that serves to neutralize and defeat the colonial state power. It is a demand that serves to neutralize and defeat the colonial state power, the ability of our oppressor to extend its rule over us. The oppressor doesn't rule us through its ideas, it rules us through its force of arms, its terror, its police, its armies, and things like that. And all of the people who tell us that we should be nonviolent in the struggle, etc., are telling us to surrender to the violence of the colonized. Black community control the police, and how do we do that? We have some little formulas that we put forth in conferences like this, that we take it and we wage that struggle at local governments, and we do other kinds of things like that. But that's us, we wage it in that fashion to raise the consciousness of African people to the responsibility. The most democratic demand that you can make is that we control what you call the police in our community. When I say we, I don't mean put a black face on the white police organization. I say black community control of the police. That's what we fight for. And that's what the Panthers were about at one time. That's what the Black Liberation Army was about. We should be the ones who make a determination who carries guns and what they do in our communities. And that's the way we guarantee that the guns in our community serve us and not the colonizer. In fact, the guns in our community would be used against the colonizer, trying to bring guns into our community to harm us. And that's why they're afraid of us. That's why they put up billboards saying, turn in your guns, I'll give you some groceries, I'll starve you to death, right? I want to welcome everybody here to this conference. It's going to be a good conference. We've got extraordinarily powerful presenters.